Like to have. So, all right. Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to be speaking with Chandler Baker. She previously wrote The Whisper Network. I'm not too proud for my mass paperback copy. With her tonight about her newest book, The Husbands. So, welcome, Chandler.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a cool group.
I know. Thank you for coming and chatting with us. And a few other quick thank yous to get out of the way. Thank you to Jennifer Crowley, our group's founder, for always doing the behind the scenes work and making these author chats possible. Thank you to Lindsay Grabacki for helping us with the technical side of things and providing her Zoom information. And thank you to all of the moms who pre-ordered this book and have already got it read, a little bit over a week after its release date. And future thank yous to all the moms who are in the process of reading the book and will join us on a recording, watch the recording later. So with that, Chandler, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the book, please?
Sure. I'm Chandler Baker, and I am a mom of two kids. I have a 6-year-old and an 18-month-old. Before Whisper Network, I had published 5 young adult novels before switching over to write books for adults. And during that time, I was also a corporate lawyer, which I left my full-time practice a couple years ago and now work a little bit here and there. The Husbands is my second adult book, and it's the Good Morning America Book Club pick. It is a book that asks the question, how far would a woman go for a little bit more help from her husband? It follows Nora Spangler, who is an overworked mom and lawyer, and she goes house hunting in a nice suburban neighborhood called Dynasty Ranch. And there she meets a group of high-powered women with enviably supportive husbands. And she agrees at one point to take on a community resident's wrongful death case. And during the process of working on that case, she gets to know the women and finds that, the air is different in Dynasty Ranch. Unlike her, the women are not so overwhelmed. And she's curious as to why this is. So as the case unravels, she uncovers what may be the secret to having it all, one that could be worth killing for.
Right.
I swore to take you out.
On a secret. Okay. Well, I know that you had mentioned you've written some YA previously. And I haven't read any of those. So tell us, was the process of writing your second adult novel, how is it different, compare and contrast the YA versus the adult novels?
Yeah, well, so writing the second adult novel after Whisper Network was definitely a different experience just because there was that added pressure after the success of Whisper Network. And I was very, very nervous trying to follow that up. And I had actually written an entire other book that I thought was going to be my follow-up to Whisper Network. And, I got through and turned it in last year. And my team we all decided that wasn't the right book. It wasn't the right follow-up. So I really did have that sort of sophomore slump. I just had it in private and which set me back quite a bit. And that was definitely a scary time, but we got through it. In terms of the difference of writing YA versus adult, definitely voice was a big one we worried about. And that's all my YA books were written in first person. And when I switched to adults, I switched to close third person, which is what The Husbands is in, because I just needed sort of that mental divide for voice. And I was constantly, when I was working on Whisper Network, I was always sort of weeding out, trying to make sure I wasn't sounding too YA. That was something my agent and my editor and I kept looking back on. I was a little bit less worried about that for The Husbands since I had been sort of in the adult world for a while longer. But with the adult books, I've just been really enjoying sort of processing the stage of life that I'm in right now, as opposed to processing sort of my high school years.
Right. Well, that makes sense. There was one of your YA books that I want to go back and read. It was the one where if someone had recently died or you could bring back someone. That one sounded really interesting to me. What was the name of that one?
This Is Not the End. I actually love that book. I usually don't like my old books. It's like once I move on to a new book, the previous book is dead to me. I think it's terrible. And I never want to think about it again. But I like This Is Not the End, maybe because I wrote it during maternity leave after the birth of my daughter. And it was just a good experience writing it, strangely, but I don't feel like it got nearly enough love.
Well, I mean, the more popular you get in the adult world, I think people get interested in backlists. So
maybe it'll come around.
We'll talk a little bit about your path to publishing.
Yeah. I definitely wasn't somebody that was like writing stories all the time growing up by any means. I didn't really think being a writer was sort of a real job that one could have. So it didn't really cross my mind. But my junior year of college, I was talking with a girlfriend, and we were just kind of talking over the phone about some of our goals. And she had said she would really like to run a marathon. And I said I would really like to try to write a book. And so during National Novel Writing Month, if anybody knows what like Nanowrimo is, it's a program that you're supposed to try to write a novel during the month of November, or you're supposed to try to write 50,000 words, which would be a very short novel, but it's close to book length. And I said I really wanted to try to write a book. And so we both decided to do our things. She ran a marathon and I wrote 50,000 words in the month of November, my junior year. And it was terrible. I've never looked at that book again, but up to that point, I mean, writing a 20-page college paper felt insurmountable, or at least highly annoying. So it was just kind of that process of learning that I could write that much, that convinced me to start looking into like what it would take to get published. So I wrote another book and then another, and went through a lot of rejection, especially on that first book. I got rejection by maybe like 100 agents before I started creating the second book. And I got an agent my first year of law school. So it was kind of like as I was pursuing my legal career, I just kept getting like just enough success to keep going. Because when we went to sell that book with my agent, it was rejected by everyone. We didn't sell it. I decided to try my hand at ghostwriting. So I ghost wrote for existing like middle grade series, and just did installments of them under pseudonyms, which was a nice way to like make a little bit of money during law school and keep me writing. And then right after I graduated law school, my agent kind of had a sit down talk with me and said, I think you really, if you want to do this writing thing, I think you need to try to write your own stuff and try to give that your attention. So I wrote a book and we sold it to Disney my second year of law school. And then we just really kept going. But again, I was like, if I wouldn't have sold Whisper Network when I did, it was again, like that, having just enough success to keep going. I was so sort of strung out by trying to do a full-time legal job at the time and write these YA books that I wasn't making enough money to live off of. And then once we sold Whisper Network, things started changing a little bit. And it was kind of exactly when I needed it to be, when I was pregnant with my second child. And I was like, okay, now how am I going to make this work for real if we keep going on at this pace? And of course, then I was able to step away a little bit. But yeah, there's just been rejection and at every stage, of course. But
wow. And you persevered. So I'm happy that you made it.
Thank you. Me too.
Well, we're always curious about a writer's author process. So what was your process with the husband? Did you write it in a linear fashion? Did you plot everything out? I mean, just talk us through how your process was for the husbands.
Oh, I wish it would have been a better process or a more efficient process, at least. Like I said, I wrote a whole other book first that I thought was going to be my next. Then I went through the process of pitching a lot of ideas until we landed on the ideas for the husbands, which I was very nervous to pitch because I thought it was so out there. It was so different, kind of. It's thematically, it feels like such a natural follow-up to Whisper Network, but it's not as grounded as Whisper Network. So it felt like a stretch. So I usually approach things by writing a pitch to myself. I try to write what I think would be the back cover copy. And if it's something that can entice me and that sounds like a fun book to read and that feels just kind of fuzzy, then I'll know that's something I might pursue. So I started with the pitch, and that's kind of my guiding light. And I referenced that pitch, throughout the process of writing. I did little other outlining for this, unfortunately, perhaps, because I basically just knew I knew the ending. I always knew where I was going to end. And I knew a couple tentpole events in the middle, but like only a couple. And I just kept writing towards it, headlights method, just as, a little bit in front of me as far as I could see. And once I got to the end of that first draft, after I turned it in to my editor, I threw away that first draft and started from a blank page again. Nobody asked me to do that this time. I just felt like, okay, I learned how to write the book. I kind of know where I'm going, what I'm trying to say, but I didn't want to feel beholden to sort of ghosts of previous past drafts. So I did start fresh again, which is why I say it wasn't a very efficient process, but I also have become less and less convinced as I've gone on with this career that writing is supposed to be made more efficient. Like, I just think your process is what your process is, and you learn how to write the book that you just wrote. Like for Whisper Network, I outlined some. For this next book I'm writing, I've outlined quite a bit more. It just, every book is its own beast.
Fair enough. Well, that's super interesting that you turned in a first draft and then kind of like rewrote it. That was another one of my questions is, in your process as an author, like when you turn in that first draft, is there any kind of, do you think, well, if 80% of this sticks, I'll be good? Was it really a full 100% redo, or are you?
It was, I definitely started from a blank page, but of course I carried with me things from that draft that made it in. I feel like when I'm turning in a first draft, I am hoping that my editor and my team feels an emotional connection with the work, that there is like a core, that there are bones in that story that they are connecting to, that they're feeling something. If they're not feeling anything, if she's not texting me while she's reading it and saying what she's liking, then I know that I'm in trouble. And sort of everything else can change around it, how we do the mystery, what the sort of turning points are, all that can change. But I think that first draft at least needs to have that little hint of magic. And then I'm okay. And I know I did my job, and I'm willing to rewrite anything else that needs to be rewritten.
Oh, fair enough. That makes sense. I actually tuned into your chat the other night with your editor.
Oh yeah.
Super informative. I really liked that. So.
Oh, I loved her. Yes. And we have followed sort of the same, we're very much in the same life stages. We've had our kids at almost the exact same times. And so I was writing this during my maternity leave, and then I was trying to get it to her before her maternity leave. And then she was trying to edit. It was a mess, but it was fun.
So where did the idea come from for the husbands? Had you watched the Stepford Wives? Had you heard about it? It's kind of the reverse trope, and it's unique and new, and it's fresh in its own way. But how did it arrive?
Yeah, so I had not watched Stepford Wives or read it. Of course, I was aware of the Stepford Wives trope and knew what it was. I think it's in sort of everyone's cultural references. So I have watched it and read it since. But really where it came from was, the seeds were kind of planted when I was talking to readers about Whisper Network. I would go around to book clubs and a bunch of professional women's groups. And that's a book about being a modern woman today in a workplace. And a lot of what people would ask me was, how do we improve corporate culture for women going forward? And their answers would start to center around the idea that, well, it won't truly be better for women unless there's more women at the top of the corporate ladder, which, okay, great. But then sort of in the same breath, people were saying to me, well, it's not always that I'm not being offered promotions or I'm not being offered more responsibility at work. It's also that I am I'm opting out in some way. I'm going part-time. I'm taking back a step. I'm going on like the mommy track at my law firm. And that resonated with me so much because there was a time after my daughter was born where I considered actually asking my bosses for a reduction in pay because I was just so looking for any way that I could to reduce the guilt I was feeling about feeling like I was kind of failing at work and I was kind of failing at home. And I just thought, what can I do to make that better? So that had kind of been marinating in the background. And then when it came time to buckle down and write this book, I was 7 months pregnant with my second child, like Nora in the book. I was staring down the barrel of the recalibration of responsibilities that come from having any new baby, of which I already knew some because I'd had one and I knew those growing pains of trying to divvy everything up. And I went on this little girls' weekend with a couple of my best law school friends. And we found ourselves talking about Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play, which, if people haven't read it, it's sort of a framework for how to talk about division of domestic labor with your spouse. And we just talked about it and talked about how we were trying to implement it in our homes, where it wasn't working, why it wasn't working, how it was helping. And I was like, there is something to how much we're talking about this. And the following week, like the idea for how to do this as sort of a reverse Stepford Wives as a vehicle to talk about this issue just kind of struck like lightning. And I was like, okay, I was like, I think this might actually be good. Then I had to pitch it to my team. Of course, they were excited about it.
Oh, all in from the get-go, huh?
Yes, thankfully. I mean, like I said, it had been a long journey, but yeah, so once we pitched this idea, everyone was good with it.
Okay, well, then I guess that's how you knew that the one that you wrote and scrapped was just not the right vehicle. This definitely is the right vehicle with all of the success that you've gotten already, and super excited
Yeah.
about it for you.
I think in that way, you know, the rejection from my editor really was such a gift. The rejection of that previous book. I mean, I know that book was fine, but like there just wouldn't have been the same conversations around it. So it's hard to hear those things sometimes, but yet it can lead to something so much better if you let it.
Definitely. Well, both of your books, I loved how the themes kind of flow from one book to the next. So I'm super excited to see about what you do next. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But so the first two have been described as feminist thrillers. And so what do you think what does that term mean to you? And is it a term that you're happy with for your books?
Yes. Well, I am very happy with it for my books. I feel that like that's kind of right where I belong and where I've really found my voice. To me, it means a healthy dose of social commentary around gender politics. It means giving vocabulary around what it means to be a modern woman today, and add that to some juicy secrets and dead bodies, and you've got a feminist thriller. And that's like, I love having both of those elements married together.
I agree. It works really well and you do it really well. There's not many other people that I can think of. I read a lot of thrillers, but I don't know many other books that I would classify as feminist thrillers. So how do you go about creating and maintaining the level of suspense throughout your books?
One thing that I think is helpful about my headlights method is a lot of times I'm just trying to end a chapter in a way that seems cool to me and that feels like it has forward momentum, that's throwing me into the next thing that I would like to know the answer to. And a lot of times I won't know the answer. And so that becomes a problem for future me to figure out. But having those chapter endings with a little bit of kick that make me wonder is really what I'm shooting for. That, and finding a balance between sort of like smaller questions that I want to be answered in addition to the larger ones. So I love a good backstory. Like I love, Nora has sort of a secret at the heart of her own marriage. I think I love layering those on top of like the more thriller plot lines.
Yeah, you had me guessing about what her secret was, but when I read it, I was like, wow, okay, well, that would be a heavy secret, a heavy burden to bear, but we're not going to get into that. So,
Yeah.
I also loved the social commentary aspects of the book. I posted that picture on Instagram last night. I was like, oh, I'm going to start tabbing everything that I feel like applies to my life. And I very quickly, like the second page, I was like, I don't have enough tabs. Never mind.
Well, thank you.
So two of my favorite bits of the social commentary was how, and it just resonated with me because it's how I do my life, is when I've got a list of things to do domestically, I'm like, okay, Saturday morning, I'm gonna get those things done right off the bat, because then I've created a cushion for the rest of my day for life to happen and for anything else. And my husband, and he's a good one, but like if I ask him to do something, he is very much like, hey, he's like, I'll do it later. I'll get to it later. And I'm like, oh God, please just do it now. It would be so much easier, would be happier. So that one really resonated with me. And then when she's in that session and she just talks about wanting to not have to direct Hayden to do all of the things, just know what needs to be done and do it without having to be asked, because we're going to talk on it, the mental load of me having to remember everything to remind him to do these things. I'm just like, it all adds up. So what would you say your favorite bits of the social commentary were in this book?
Oh, good question. I like, there are a lot that I feel like resonate with my own life. Certainly there's that, the laterness of it all. My girlfriend and I were just chatting actually yesterday at lunch, and she was like, I just feel like I feel like I'm always like trying to find the right time to ask to do something. And it feels like whenever I ask, it's always like the wrong time. So there's that part of it. I like the idea that there's a part in the book where we're talking about how consumed we've become with the idea of Disney princesses, and like not teaching our daughters that they need to be rescued. The whole, like, you don't have to marry a CEO, you can be a CEO. And I think all of those are like wonderful sentiments. And yet I also feel like many of us are just feeling a sense, I guess, that there's all these narratives that we have to subscribe to these days, which is exacerbated by social media. But there's like the wellness narrative, there's the beauty narrative, there's even like the interior design, beautiful, organized house narrative, there's Pinterest mom, and now there's like the girl boss narrative too. And it's all these things that are specifically marketed towards women. And they're telling us like, you need to have this in order to feel fulfilled. You hear the term thrown around, I feel like, in some of these inspirational communities, like made for more. And I feel like, okay, yes, we're full, like we are more than fulfilled, we're overflowing, we feel like we're failing on all fronts. And because of sort of the packaging of that, and like the career success and the idea that you have to lean in, you have to do all these things. I am a huge feminist, and yet I understand that it's like sometimes you feel almost abandoned by the fact that we've been left with a situation that has not involved any subtraction of responsibilities. Like, we're doing all the new things, and also we're still expected to do all the old things. So in the book, it says it's addition at best and multiplication at worst. And I feel that in my bones sometimes. So things like that. And then also just thinking about the contributions that I wonder if women could be making. Like, what contributions are we missing out on by women, by 50% of our population, because they're so loaded down or they're opting out of the workforce? And like, that actually scares me, thinking about what women could be accomplishing if they weren't loaded down at home.
Totally. And I agree with you 100%. I got an advanced reader copy, so I didn't have that dedication in this one, but I've seen it on Instagram and I loved that. And it was also kind of sad to hear that the statistic about women leaving the workforce in droves during COVID, because I mean, if your kid has to do preschool or whatever grade level at home, and who do you think is going to be the teacher? Usually the moms.
Yeah.
And that's a tough spot to be in. So is there anything did you glean anything, wise wisdom from the COVID experience or have any commentary on that?
I think many of us have hoped that, and I think it's made the invisible labor of parenting, or not just parenting, of household work, more visible. I think a big part of it is making people be able to see what 100% of running a household really looks like. So I like to think that has helped our case. It's certainly made us talk more about parenting in relation to work. But yet we're still seeing kind of the proof in the pudding. I think women are still like a little bit bendier with their careers. They're kind of the first person to say, oh yeah, no, I'll step back and I'm here. So, you can take your meeting and I'll take my meeting with like headphones and a kid hanging off my hip. I'll multitask and do all those things. And we're seeing women step away at, a much higher rate. And I mean, looking at how much we think that this is going to like set back the gender pay gap and those kinds of things, it really hurts my heart to think about that. So yeah, I just think like a lot of times we hear how much better we're doing on dividing domestic labor. I just think like, why is it taking so long? And also the proof is in the pudding. If we were really a 50-50, then we would not see the kind of statistics we're seeing coming out of this pandemic.
Right. And I think that just depends on what's your definition of better, because if you're talking about like the 1930 standards, sure, we're doing better, but it's not 50-50. So
yeah,
where we're at, but we need to keep pushing and go a little further. So
exactly. And intensive parenting, like I do think we are doing a lot better at parenting and dads being like emotionally intelligent with their children and being hands-on, like all that stuff we've truly gotten better at. But that part of parenting, I think, can feel a bit more rewarding. Like the reading to kids at bedtime, those kind of things are wonderful and important. But cleaning out Tupperware is also a part of parenting after school. Like kids need laundry, like it needs to be carried up from the bottom of the stairs. Like those are all aspects of parenting that aren't getting as much fair play, as it were.
I'd agree. And I'd have to say that our household, my husband is a very hands-on dad. He does the soccer and all of that, but the not fun stuff is still very much heavily on myself. So,
Yeah.
Speaking of that, with the whole COVID situation, my son, somebody in his class tested positive, so they shut the whole class down. And my husband, to his credit, he took off the week from work because he knew I had a lot of deadlines going up. So like reading this book right now and going through that, I'm just like, oh man, you're a keeper. Thank you for stepping up. So
that's great. And I always say, like, I'm only really interested in talking about like the good guys, because I don't have any friends that are married to bad guys. Like all my friends are smart, outspoken, feminist women that are not doormats in their relationship. So I'm only interested in thinking about the guys that are really trying. But I don't know if you read, there was that New York Times article. It was like Harvard study, and it sort of broke the executive functions of household management into 4 parts, and the anticipation and the monitoring are still largely on women, which really is that mental load, the thinking like, when is the registration, the having the antenna up, when is the registration for camps, when are we going to need childcare, when is my mother-in-law going to need a present for Mother's Day, like those little things, and then monitoring to make sure it gets done, and checking back in. Those are primarily female functions, and a lot of men are great at like, tell me what to do, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, but if I have to tell you to do it, and then the later, oh yeah, yep. I'm not going to get started on that. So I have to assume that there were some interesting conversations in your household while you were writing this novel. And I'm just going to assume that, your husband, from reading the author's note at the end, he's super supportive. So, I mean, I hope that those conversations were positive, but just kind of like shed some light on what you guys discussed. And did he help challenge your ideas for this book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, a book does not get written with like an actually newborn unless it's sort of a team effort for a family. So there was a lot of help involved because literally I was writing, when our son was days old because I had a deadline that I hadn't gotten as far along on as I'd meant to before he was born. and yeah, it's funny, there was a time when I was writing the book where we had a couple neighbors drop by and we're just having one of those conversations that married people often have. And the husband of the neighbor said something like, I tell her I'm happy to help. She just needs to tell me what to do. And my husband was immediately like, oh, you are going to be in trouble with Chandler. You're not supposed to say that anymore. You're not supposed to say that. I was like, oh, good. You're listening to the things I'm writing about. But yes, I think the parts of us that really are in the book is just how difficult it can be to communicate about these things. I think one thing we've talked a lot about is we see these articles and essays, like as I would come across as I was writing the book, and they're all like, 5 steps to take to fix division of domestic labor in your household, like how not to get in any more arguments about the laundry or something, and it just made it sound so simple, like even an idiot could do it. And yet we're here and we feel ourselves doing all the things that Nora and Hayden do. Like we scoreboard, we list what we each do in the household as evidence to each other. We get really defensive. We take it super personally when one of us adds something to each other's to-do lists. And then we go back to the list keeping, because what happens in our own homes can feel so incredibly personal. And we are certainly not immune to that. And we would just be like, okay, all these articles are telling us that communication is the key, but like communicating is what's so hard about this. It's a little bit like telling a kid that in order to be good at math, you have to be good at math. Like, okay, we get it. So I think we've given ourselves a little bit more grace, and we're like, you know what? We don't have to be perfect at this. We're going to get frustrated. It's the life stage we're in. Like, these are difficult things to sort out because, we're both right on certain aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you feel about the representation of the men in the book?
I know the men that I know that have read it feel like it's harsh. I feel that, it like reflects some certain emotional truth. And I think what's funny about the husbands of Dynasty Ranch is that, you see what they're doing, helping around the neighborhood, and everybody, all the readers that I've talked to think it's creepy and think the men are being creepy. And what cracks me up is like when you really look at what they're doing, which is thinking ahead about what they should get the teachers for the end of school year gift, knowing when the nanny is going to be off, laying out the soccer uniform for the next day, organizing closets and junk drawers. Like those are so benign. There's nothing that should be creepy about that. It's creepy because we're bringing sort of our own social expectations and narratives to it. So that's what's funny to me, that juxtaposition of like what's actually happening and what we're bringing to the table.
It's funny that you put it like that, because when I was reading, I was like, man, I'm surprised it took Nora as long as it did to cop to a few things, because I am kind of in that a little bit of the percentage. I didn't find it creepy, but I was like, well, that's not normal. Like, how did
right? And you're like, but why? Why is that sending up such antennas for it? Because it's really not in the same way as like Stepford Wives, where they're just obsessed with like household cleaning products. Like these people are having sort of full marriages, but they're just being helpful and they're not groaning about it.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm friends with a lot of the people in our Facebook group, and one of them she rated the book on Bookstagram, and you had seen it and you commented on it. And her husband also was like, well, this sounds like a book I need to read.
Oh no.
And so I called him out. I was like, okay, well, I look forward to hearing your thoughts. And he goes, well, I'm a man of my word. I will read this book and I will get back to you. And so I actually screenshotted what he said today. And he said, I figure every husband can benefit from reading it, being challenged by the realities women face that we men simply fail to recognize or admit that we recognize. I appreciated how it made me further examine the dynamics of my own marriage. Real conversations that he had with his wife were basically captured verbatim. And he doesn't review books, so he just says, I don't have a star rating, but I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. So you've got
Oh, that's
good-
gonna make me cry. Wow. That is so nice and good for him for reading it. That is amazing that he read it. And I love what he says, or admit that we recognize, because I do question whether it's oblivious or willfully oblivious, because the status quo is nice sometimes for them. So that's very self-aware.
So one of the questions that we had from our members comes from Liz, and she said, how do you think that we can use realistically to get men to take on more of their fair share? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, the one that always stands out to me, and I know people have different experiences of this, is paternity leave. And that's a hard one for us to sort on our own, because I know, like, the firm that I work for, they offer some paternity leave, but nobody takes it because of the stigma of it. I mean, they'll take a few days here and there, but that's really it. Because I do think sort of that the cement can dry on the responsibilities for each parent during those early months, because in that time when women are on maternity leave, they become the experts, and they find themselves they've come up with the schedule, they know all the things, and they become the delegator, and the husband is like constantly asking for permission. How do I do this? And it just creates a dynamic that really sticks. So I think that the default bias really originates there. I also think it creates an issue for, like, a motherhood bias for even non-parents, because we're often waiting for women of a certain age. We're like, when are they going to have a baby? What are they doing? And that can negatively impact women. And, a baby should impact everyone's career. I think I'm always struck by, like, when you're a woman, when you have to, like, announce a pregnancy at work, it's such a thing. Like, you have to think about the timing. You have to think about how you're going to tell people. And, like, my husband, when I was pregnant, each time just, like, mentioned it in passing, and that's fine, because no one expects it to disrupt their lives in the same way. So I think I understand why people care about maternity leave. It's a pain when somebody leaves and you have to cover their work, but it should be a pain when anybody has a child, not just women. So I think that would go a long way. Then, of course, people raising sons, we need to give, our sons, I have a son now too, like, not just the same amount of chores, but the same type of chores. I think that's really important, and, something I'm going to try to be more mindful of going forward.
Definitely. And like we talked about earlier, I have a son who's 5, and he will be doing the same things that I do and the same things that Dad does. Like, anything age appropriate, I'm starting to brainstorm about what I can set for expectations for him.
Yeah,
So
it's hard, that age level. Because it really, separately, it just really takes more effort on your part to assign the chores and make sure they get done. I'm in the same place as you. So.
Mhm. Oh, let's see. Oh, and one of the other things that I loved about the book, and it was near the end, and it wasn't, a huge theme in the book, but I love the addition of the book club in the book. And I was curious, I don't think it was mentioned, but I wondered what book were they reading? What book were they discussing at that book club event?
Oh gosh, I wonder if I knew. I don't know. I know she lists, like, a bunch of books that they have read. Because I remember at the end, she was like, said something about I think the children that catch on fire, which was nothing to see here. And I'm not sure what they were discussing.
Well, are you in any in real life book clubs, as I call them? This is a virtual book club. Do you meet up with friends and discuss books? And
I do. I have been in my main book club, I guess I'll call it, for let's see, 9 years, I think, which I love. And then recently my neighborhood cul-de-sac also started a book club. So that's been almost a year and I'm enjoying that too. But book club's
wow,
like a big part of my life.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Well, we were so excited. One of the things that we like to share in our Instagram stories is anytime a book that we're all talking about gets optioned, whether it be for a TV or for a movie, that this news seemed really fast, like really soon. It dropped before the book actually came out. And normally when we're chatting with authors, their book's been out for a while and it just got optioned and it's so early in the process that they're just like, it might happen, it might not, but it really seems like this is going to happen. And
From your
so,
lips to God's ears.
so is Kristen Wiig, is she on board to play Nora?
Yes, yeah, she will play Nora. She was the first person I talked to during this whole process. So that was back at last October. So she got it on a Friday. We sent her a draft, my film agent did, sent her an early draft of it. I wasn't even done revising and heard from her on a Sunday. So I was very fast, was on the phone with her by Monday. And yeah, so she's been involved in the whole process and pitching to the studio and all that stuff. And I'm writing the screenplay and nervous about that, but excited. It's going to be a new challenge. So we'll see.
Have you started that yet?
I've done the outline. We're getting ready to really do like commencement and ramp up on it. Kristen is filming right now and she should be done soonish. And I am trying to get through the draft of my next book so my slate can be clean and I will be screenwriting full time at that point.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. Have you kind of brainstormed about what the differences you think you're going to experience writing the screenplay versus a novel? And do you think that one might be easier than the other, or it's just like a different kind of hard, or for lack of a better word, but
Yeah, I think it's a different kind of hard. I guess the biggest thing I'm finding as I'm like laying everything out is there's just so much less space in a movie. It's truly startling. And so when you've written a mystery of any sort, there's all these pieces that have to go into it to make sense. But doing the screenplay is very much like a game of subtraction. You're thinking, what can I take out and what can I combine? But every time you do that, it's like a house of cards and you're like, oh my gosh, does this still make sense? Does this still make sense? So I'm just like slicing things out wholesale and then checking and seeing what can go together. I think the nice part is that a lot of, Kristen's such a great actress and a lot of Nora's like internal monologue can be served in a look. And I think we'll get it and we'll know what Nora's thinking when she's like with the Garys of the world, which are her law partner. So I think we'll get that quickly. Yeah, it's just a steep learning curve, but it is so much fewer words, which is also a nice thing, right?
right. Well, so what made you decide that, you wanted to do the screenwriting?
Yeah, I didn't have the opportunity really to be attached to a Whisper network. It was talked about briefly, but they wanted to attach someone better with more experience. And we just kept getting hung up in that process of looking for, we had sold to a big network and they wanted to find someone experienced. And we just kept getting takes from writers and they weren't get approved and writers would get attached and then fall off. And I was just so frustrated by it. I was like, I am a writer. I don't want to get hung up on this part of the process when I know that I can write things and I can write a lot of different things. So when, it came time to send out the husbands, I was in a different position than, Whisper Network had become a New York Times bestseller. I felt like I had a little bit more leverage. And I just said from the start, I said, I want to be the one to write this. I wanted to be in control of its fate, at least at that stage. So I don't know. I'm definitely approaching it with a healthy degree of fear and trepidation. I know that it is its own skill set and its own thing, but also I trust myself a lot, and I know that I will do a good job and put my all into it. So,
Well, I mean, when you put it that way, it makes sense as long as you're willing to do it. I think that
yes.
there's like, I'm not doing that. Nope. Somebody else, I will just enjoy someone else's take. But given your experience with the Whisper Network and your confidence and your abilities, I can't wait to see the movie of the husbands. I think that you'll do great.
Thank you. I mean, we hope. We'll see. We can all say that right now, right?
Yes. Well, so, congratulations on being the GMA book club pick for August. And then, Whisper Network being a Reese pick back in the day. And it's just like lightning struck twice for you. When you were writing the husbands, were you just like, man, I've got something special here? Or was it just, I don't know what goes into the process of being chosen from quote unquote a celebrity book club, but I mean, was that surprising to you, or how's the whirlwind been this go around, being your second novel and getting a lot more fanfare because people might have already been exposed to you through the Whisper Network?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought that because Whisper Network had gotten chosen for Reese's book club, I thought there's no way that I'll get another book club pick. It doesn't happen twice to people. So I really thought, okay, I'm going in alone, and that's fine. So yes, I was shocked when a couple of months ago I found out that we were going to be the GMA book club pick. So I feel very fortunate. I'm very glad to have a team at Flatiron, my publisher, that is excited about my books. But I don't know, I credit like my friends so much, because I really think that my process is just think about what we're talking about all the time and then turn that into a book. And then I hope that that's something other people want to talk about. And so far it seems like it, since they've gotten book clubbish success. So that's nice.
Definitely. I think that this is going to be a great book club book. And I think you're going to have a lot of women shaking their heads saying, yep, Chandler's got me.
Yes. Well, I hope at least people have opinions one way or the other.
Well, so, I know you just, because I follow you on social, I think you just finished your first draft of the third book. Are you going to kind of continue with these themes of powerful women and important themes to women? What can you tell us about the third book?
Yeah, so I am. I am just keep going with kind of what interests me. So during the pandemic, I feel like a lot of mothers felt a bit drained. They felt a little bit nibbled away at in certain ways. They felt sort of the physicality of motherhood. And tentatively, it's about motherhood and how the stage of life can feel long. So tentatively, it's called It Goes By So Fast, and it's about how it doesn't sometimes. So I think people will, it's a bit quirky. I think people will know what I mean once they like hear more about the book, what I mean about it being draining. It's very literal.
Okay. So classify this. I mean, it sounds like the themes are going to continue on through the three of your books. So are you going to classify this personally as a feminist thriller, or is it a little bit lighter, or what are your initial thoughts where it's at now in the stage?
Yeah, there's a murder. So we've definitely got a dead body. It's definitely got a mystery component. All the suspects are 4-year-olds. So yeah, I think it's similar in tone. I think it'll be what people expect from me in a good way.
Well, that is super awesome to hear. I already can't wait because I love the husbands. So
Thank you.
we always like to wrap up our chats by asking our guests, if there's anything that you're currently reading and or recommending, lay it on us. We always like to check out what our favorite authors are into. So if you've got any.
Okay. Let's see. What I was literally starting this evening was, I started If You Lived Here, You'd Be Famous by Now. And it is by Via, I don't know her last name. Sorry, I could tell you. Via Bleidner. And it's a memoir or a series of essays about growing up at Calabasas High, which is where the Kardashians went. And I don't know, it's just fun. So I'm enjoying that. I really liked Fierce Little Things by Miranda Beverly Whittemore, which is about a group of friends that grew up in a cult in Maine, and they did something terrible when they were younger. And it's just kind of like about the friends that knew you way back when, what you would do for them, and them hiding this really big secret. I loved The Plot by Jean Hamp Corlitz, which probably a lot of people read, but it's about
with her a little later this fall.
So. Oh, are you? It's so good. Well, I loved The Undoing on HBO, which is, based on her book, You Should Have Known. And I just feel like this is so smart about an author that steals somebody's plot and runs with it. And it's just, it was just so much fun to read. I really loved The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. And I always say that's like, if you wanted Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine to be a thriller, then that would be like the perfect book for you. It's really fun. And I loved it on audiobook also. And then let's see, for my last one, I would say, I really like The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow, which is about sort of the suffrage movement. If the suffrage movement also had to do with witchcraft, the people not wanting women to have witchcraft. And it was given to me by two different girlfriends. And I feel like people just love that book because it's really lush. And it's a great book to go into fall. It's kind of light historical fantasy.
Awesome. Well, we will get those up and share them with our group later on this evening or first thing tomorrow. So where can we find you on socials? And then give me a 3-word description of the husbands.
Oh my gosh. Okay. On social. On social, you can find me at Chandler Baker Books, and on Twitter, that's Instagram. And on Twitter, I think it's C Baker Books. And then I also have a Facebook page, Chandler Baker. And then husbands in 3 words. Mom rage. Help ?
Liz.
Yes, click those pens, guys.
I know, I almost brought a pen.
Feel you. If only we could all have one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Chandler. We really can't wait for the next book, even though this one just dropped. So we wish you so much continued success. We'll be waiting on pins and needles for the movie and hoping that comes to fruition. And just really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with us tonight.
Yes, thank you guys. I think these Facebook groups that have cropped up about books are just so special, and they're doing so much for books. So I just really appreciate everyone's word of mouth. It's great.
All right. Well, we will keep the word of mouth going over on our end, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too. Talk soon.
All right. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.